Jim, because she'll be like, oh, he's taking credit for all this stuff? Are you kidding me? He's up on the roof right now with the maintenance guy trying to fix the AC, and they're waiting for Steranko. That's exactly where I was. She's like, where are you? I go on the roof. She goes, don't jump. Jim needs you right now. And I go, okay.
Yeah, you can jump later.
Okay, yeah, we got to do you first. Now, I see Kim left off at some point. I heard Michael Chabin, so she's somewhere in your...
Go ahead, you finish.
As an illustrator, he said what might be the world's record for visualizing the most classical, fictional, heroic characters than any other artist, in addition to producing a multitude of movie posters, record albums, magazines, cover paintings, and plus, I gotta throw this on here. Oh, it's here already. I'm gonna get to that. Wizard magazine credited Steranko as the fifth most influential comic artist in the history of the form. During that time, he generated more than 150 original storytelling devices and techniques that changed the direction of comics medium and created a devoted cult, that's you people, of followers who have nicknamed him the Innovator. Surprisingly, he only created, and this is amazing, 29 comic books, barely nothing compared to the hundreds and thousands of issues some artists have done. Yet, in that limited number, he developed 150 narrative devices never before used in the comic book medium. 10 times more than any other artist put together. Right here. I know some people that have egos that think this other way out there, but no, that's not the thing. His international newsstand entertainment magazine, Preview, I used to get that all the time, had an impressive 25-year run. That's amazing in magazines. And was a forerunner of similar titles such as Premiere, Movie Line, and Entertainment Weekly. Before the internet, that's what we used to do, kids, magazines, and Preview was like the only source to go find out about movie stuff. I used to have a subscription. As its editor, Steranko conducted hundreds of superstar interviews and penned more than 3 million words for the publication. And on a side note, thank you for putting Sybil Danning on that cover, because I love that issue. But anyway, that's a long story. He has, not that long, he has collaborated with such top filmmakers, and this is my favorite part, really. As George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, he created the look of my hero, I know a lot of folks out there, of Indiana Jones, right here. See that hat and the whip and the cool swagger? Harrison Ford brought that to life on the screen. But way before that, Jim Steranko brought it to life on paper. So Indiana Jones, he should tip his hat to this guy right here. He's the man. I swear, I have it framed in my house. And the international, the initial production illustrations for Raiders of the Lost Ark, Steranko was among the first to be hired by Francis Ford Coppola for Bram Stoker's Dracula. Everybody remember that movie? Yeah? For which he was the film's project conceptualist and served in similar capacity on 3 other films and the director's projects. In 1974, he created Red Tide. Anybody have copies of that? I saw some of those last night. The first modern graphic novel, years before Will Eisner's contract with God. So, don't let people fool you. This is, again, the real deal right here. Steranko has won numerous awards in both Europe and America, lectured on popular culture, and exhibited his work at more than 300 international exhibitions, including the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and it's even better, the Mona Lisa's hometown, the Louvre in Paris. Come on, guys. This is it. I mean, you don't get bigger than this, all right? This is why this is so long. I mean, geez Louise, man. Unbelievable. He scripted for Warner Brothers a Justice League TV series, appearing in the Starz Network, Comic Books Unbound, and served as creative consultant for the History Channel's recent 2-hour documentary, which is really great. If you haven't seen it, it's on DVD. Comic Book Superheroes Unmasked. His season 1 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reviews for the Hollywood Reporter site generated a record number of hits. Remember Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Coulson, S.H.I.E.L.D., right here, this guy. While Entertainment Week's double-sized summer edition showcased Steranko and their biggest feature ever published on a comic creator. He is currently prepping An Evening with Steranko for live theatrical venues across the country. And if you were there last night, by the way, if you were one of the 24 intimate people we shared, my God, it was a marathon. We were up there from 8 o'clock to 2 in the morning for this guy, and he still had a second wind. We were like dying, and Jim's like, "Want to go out for some ice cream now?" I'm like, "No, I gotta go." My wife's texting me, "Go to bed." I go, "Let's try, go." And this is the best part about it. I can tell you that too. Nobody is dressed to the nines like this guy here. This is the coolest cat in all of Mohegan Sun. We might be at the Sun, but this man never sweats. And he's still the best dressed man in comics. All right, now we can finally do it properly after we've talked all about this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a living legend of comic book history in the flesh, the one, the only, Pennsylvania's own, James Steranko. Now let's really get it. And now, sir, I'm going to turn this over to your capable hands. Another great person, Mr. John Suntress from the Word Balloon podcast. He's going to conduct your show because I'm getting alerts like Batman and the Bat Signal back in Gotham City. They're like, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm with Steranko." They go, "You got to come and help us. We need you.
We need you.
We need you, Batman. You have to save the day." But sir, I wish I could stay here. You know I really do.
Thank you, man.
I want to be here, but I have to go do it. I got thousands depending on me.
Raise some hell.
I will, buddy. Anyway, thank you all for coming to the show. You're going to have a great panel.
No, it's all good. No, I'm thrilled. So we got. No, that was the next. I was like, oh my God, I missed it. I felt terrible. I have dreams like that where you're ready for a test and you're high school test and you're in your underwear and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, sorry, another protein I'm on for it.
I was waiting out there in my underwear. Where were you?
I was putting my Retro Vegas t-shirt on. Jim, it's great to see you, and obviously Mitch gave you an incredible introduction. It's all true. That's the incredible thing. What a life, Jim.
You know, I'm exhausted just hearing that damn introduction. You know that? Where's my pillow? Gotta ask you a question, John.
Talk to me.
What are all these people doing in my room?
See, I should wear my Sans Rat Pack t-shirt instead, so for your team
I'll get around to it. You know, I thought we might start with a story I've told before, but it still holds up, about the day that I became a Marvel associate, or in my own terminology, an architect. I believe I was one of the original Marvel architects because, not that I was there at the very beginning, but I got there close to the beginning when things were still being formed. Marvel was still formulating their approach, their strategy, and numerous other characters. So, would that be okay if I got to that day?
Yeah.
It's tough to say exactly where it starts. I grew up as a kid reading comic books. You know, this is the thing all of us have in common. This is what makes us part of the same brotherhood, John, is because I was exactly like you. I loved comics when I was a kid. I collected them, spent my life reading them, and maybe dreaming about producing comic books along the way. If we have time at the end, I'll tell you a little bit about my childhood and that comic book thing. But at the time that this story happened, I was working full-time as an art director at an ad agency. I was an art director. I had about 5 or 6 guys under me, and we were producing super quality ads from TV to billboards along the way. And people often ask me, for example, what is it that makes your work different from other artists? I think that's more for you to look at and explain, but I can tell you this. I come from a completely different background than most comic book artists. How do I know that? I know these guys. I've worked with them, I've eaten with them, I've collaborated with them, I've fought with them. So I know essentially where they came from. And at this particular time, I was a designer. And it's sort of like, do we have some musicians here? Anybody play an instrument? Well, as you know, after you learn an instrument, you don't have to think about playing the note. You know, it's automatic.
Muscle memory.
Exactly. What you have to be concerned about at that point is not hitting the right note, but playing it with a particular emotional quality that creates some kind of resonance with the audience. That's where you're at, but the notes are there. And I can tell you this, as a designer, and maybe a couple of you have been at the table today and you've watched me inscribe and sign books, and you'll see it always comes out like almost like a rubber stamp. Some people actually say that, my God, that looks like it's rubber stamped on there. But that's because my hand, my heart remembers. And I don't have to think about it. I can think about, saying something else. So it's kind of automatic. What I'm telling you is that I can't put down, as a designer, I cannot put down on the page bad lines. And there are very few designers in the comic book area. And what I mean by that, the comic book world is riddled with great draftsmen. But they're not particularly designers. So they draw things well, but they often don't put them in the right place. And you probably noticed that in comic books. Some are much better than others, but I come out of a design background, so that was a very strong element that I brought to my work. Another thing was cognitive science. This was my strong point. At the ad agency, I was an authority on cognitive science, and I brought that to my work. And the other people that were there at the agency really, weren't specialists in that thing. But when I got in the comic book business, how could I not bring that authority into the work? It would be impossible. I couldn't do it. So these are some of the things that I invested in my comic book work that made it look different. And there's lots of others. For example, I was a performer. When I got into comics, I had 2 full-time jobs. That is an ad agency art director, and I also played rock and roll 4 or 5 nights a week. Sometimes out of town, sometimes out of state. So I brought that professionalism, plus the qualities of music. You think there would be very little correlation, for example, John, between comic book art and music. I'm here to tell you that there are many, many correlations. I've written about those, and you can find them on my posts from time to time. By the way, I'd like to invite all of you, before I forget, may I do this commercial?
Absolutely.
If on Sunday night from 10 o'clock East Coast time to 12, you have nothing else to do or nothing else too important to do, I'd like you to visit with me on Twitter. I have this site that I call TNT, and I talk to 20,000 people. They ask me questions about people I've worked with, my life, my work, and so forth. Sometimes it gets very personal. We talk about the things we love, talk about the things we hate. We cover the spectrum. And this is how to do it. It's very simple. Twitter, you can sign in a moment. I think you have like two areas to fill out. Doesn't cost anything, it's free. And when you get there, type in this word, one word, I am Steranko. I am Steranko. And you'll come right to my site. And if you do that, come in and say hello to me. Hey, Jim, I was at Mitch's Con last weekend, and thought I'd come in and raise some hell with you tonight. So, Sunday nights, East Coast time, between 10 and 12 o'clock. I'm looking forward to you dropping by and saying hello. So, I grew up reading comics, just like all of us. This is what brings us together. We're part of the same brotherhood. My mother told me a story a couple of years ago. I had to make her prove it, which she did, but she said I was reading at 1.5 years old. I didn't believe that story. Mom, would you give me a break? Until she produced her baby book. You know Mom's baby's books? You know those? She produced a baby book with, my height, my weight, my development. And there it was. I was actually reading at 1.5 years old. Which may be a little precocious, but what the hell, somebody's got to do it. So, I think I'm in the same category as some people that you might know who learned English by reading comics. If anybody know who Fritz Lang is, raise your hand. I like it. Great German director. Fritz Lang learned English by reading comic strips. Federico Fellini learned English by translating Flash Gordon from English into Italian when he was a kid. A good friend of mine, a French director named Alain Resnais. Some of his films were, do you know Renee's work? Anybody? Two of his greatest films were Last Year at Marienbad and Hiroshima Mon Amour. He changed literally film technique by eliminating the lap dissolve. So, comics were part of my life. I grew up with them. I couldn't shut that off. They were there. They're part of my history. I'm part of their history now. So, when I was in my 20s, and always had this kind of vision, this dream of maybe doing a little bit of comic book work so I could make a statement. I was already making really good money. There isn't too much good money in comics, or at least there wasn't in those days. They didn't share. They put you in slavery, and that was the end of it, folks. But I managed to meet a few people along the way whose work that I loved and who influenced me. And one of them was the EC artist. You may know him as the man who created and initiated Daredevil at Marvel and many other things, Wally Wood. You guys know Wood? Raise your hands, anybody.
There we go.
You know Wood. And believe me, I wouldn't kid you about this. I kid you about a lot of things, but not about this. Wood was one of the world's consummate artists. He had the magic touch. Everything he did had a certain quality about it that made you fall in love with it. And I knew Woody for a while, and I used to visit him at his studio in Manhattan. And we were chatting one day, happened to be up there doing some business, I'm not exactly sure what. And I showed Woody some drawings that I had done lately, and he said, "You'll never be happy." What's that mean? He said, "You will never be happy, you'll never be satisfied, you'll never be a complete creator unless you're in this business, unless you make that statement that you're talking about." And I said, "Hey, look, I've already got a couple of good jobs. I'm an ad agency art director. I'm playing rock and roll 5 nights a week." I said, "I think I've got most of my plate that I can handle." But Woody's comment made a deep impression on me. I never quite thought about it in that way before. And coming from this man meant an awful lot to me. And before I knew it, he picked up the phone, and I wasn't sure what was going on. He made a phone call. He made a phone call to Tower Comics, where he was currently producing Thunder Agents and Dynamo. Remember that series? Any of you guys remember the Thunder Agents books? Okay. And this is Wally writing and drawing. So it was really pure Wally Wood and having fun, having the time of his life. Now, who did he call? The guy he called was the publisher and the wrangler at this publishing company, Tower. I may have to ask for your help because this is it was a guy who produced a panel in the Sunday papers called "They'll Do It Every Time," which he took over from Jimmy Hatlow. Who am I thinking of?
Boy, you stumped me. Anybody? Yeah, I don't know, man.
Well, maybe I'll think of it along the way.
But he was the publisher at Tower.
He was the publisher at Tower. Woody called him up and said, "Hey, I've got a kid here who I believe is going to make some noise in the comic book business if I can get the ball rolling for him." And he said he brought some work up, and I think you should take a look at it. His name was Harry Shorten.
Okay. Yeah.
Do I get some points?
Absolutely.
I think I hurt myself.
I heard something's happening.
Harry Shorten. And Woody said, catch a cab. He wrote down the address. It was at the top of Manhattan do you guys know what the Flatiron building is in New York? That triangular building? There we go. That office is at the top of the Flatiron building.
23rd and 5th.
There you go, 23rd, 5th, gentlemen. That's very cool.
So, took the cab over and took my little drawings in, and I'll remember this moment because it was one of the biggest offices I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was as big as a baseball field. The desk was huge. The carpet was so thick it tickled my ankles. I mean, what a place. So by the time I should have taken a cab from the door over to Harry's desk. Really, it was like a long walk. And we chatted for a little while, and Harry was looking at my, just some drawings that I had done, maybe of some characters. I'm not really sure what it is. Some stuff I just wanted to show Woody. And apparently, I can't explain it. Apparently, he liked what he saw. And he asked me a couple of questions, what I did for a living. I told him, and he said, "I wonder if you could do a comic book for us." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I'd like to hire you to draw a 48-page comic book." He said, "I think you have the kind of magic that could make it work." And what he was talking about is putting me on the same level as my hero, Wally Wood. I was stunned by that. And he said, "Do you have any ideas for characters?" And I'm saying like, "Hey, Harry's the whole guy's like, come on. I grew up in this business, of course." So he said, "Why don't you do a little presentation for me? Bring it back up and we'll take a look and see what it's like, and we'll make a decision then." So I went back home to Pennsylvania, and I produced a character called Super Agent X. What the hell was that about? Well, we were in the age of 007. The newsstands were full of James Bond ripoffs. Bond was breaking box office records with his films, and really damn good films, Cubby Broccoli, Sean Connery. And TV was riddled with TV shows like Secret Agent Man, Man from U.N.C.L.E. What else you got there?
Yeah, man. Wild West was later, and but the Flynn movies, the Van Halen movies, all this stuff, like you said, Bond created this spy craze.
Oh,
that was ridiculous. I mean,
there was a great spy vibe going on, so I thought, why don't I capitalize on this? I mean, I come out of the advertising business, so you know, I'm used to running the trends. Super Agent X. Where'd the X come from? Well, the X-Men had just started over at Marvel, and I was pretty sure that Marvel did not own and copyright and trademark the damn letter X. So I borrowed the X from them. And Harry loved the title. The character was in costume. And I had written a script. And I think we had talked on the phone about it, and I had produced 20 pages of penciled material plus cover designs. I brought it up to show Harry. Liked it. He was going through the pages, looking, and he's kind of nodding approval, and then he liked what he saw, and he said, Jim, this is maybe the very last time that we'll get together. He said, I'm going to turn you over to my art director, and you'll work with him. His name is Sam Schwartz. And that kind of rang a bell. And Sam, and Harry said, Sam was a previous Archie Comics editor. And bang, I knew where he was then. He said, come on, I'll introduce you to him. So we walked down the hall and got to this office. I call it an office, but I'm really being too generous because it was more like a small phone booth. And I think it had one chair in it because there was no room for two. It was one damn small office full of filing cabinets. And he introduced me to Sam, and he said, you know, Jim's going to be working for us. I want you to help him. I could use some help. So Sam took the pages, first 20 Super Agent X pages in pencil. And right up front, I introduced the characters. Right the second page, and one of them was a female scientist whom I based on Kim Novak.
Nice.
You guys know Kim Novak?
No,
Easily maybe one of the most beautiful women in the world, am I right?
Double candle.
Very austere.
Okay.
Very cool blonde, very austere, and almost untouchable. Which is the way I wanted my woman scientist to be. Okay? And Sam began to shake his head like this. I said, what's the problem? And he said, see this woman character? He said, I don't like the shape of her nose. What kind of hell did I just step into? The shape of her nose? I said, well, maybe you'd like her to have one of those cute upturned noses like Betty and Veronica. And he said, you know, I think I would. Damn. This isn't going to be a happy tour here, but continues. We continue to work through the pages, and he has to shake his head almost every page he gets. I'm not sure what he's really getting at. And he gets close to the end where Super Agent X, close to the end of the story, where Super Agent X takes out two villains with a kind of double punch like this. Bam! And Sam says, nobody can throw a punch like that. And I'm going, this is the comic book world. You know, what the hell are you talking about? Nobody can throw a punch like that. If I say he can throw a punch like that, he can throw a punch like that. There it is on the page. Moreover, I had boxed for 3 years. Boxed. And this jackass had nothing to tell me about throwing a punch and what could and couldn't happen with a punch. Nothing. Zero. He was just a little squirt. Probably never got in a fight in his life. Didn't know anything more than what he saw in some old movies. He's telling me about how to fight. And then it dawned on me what was going on. He didn't care about the shape of that woman's nose. It made a thing to her. He was training me. Get it? He was training me to be his slave. He was the prince at Terrificon. And I was just some new kid, which I was. And he should have been helping me. He should have been encouraging me and bringing me along. But instead, he decided to make me his slave and put a collar around my neck. And I thought that was a dirty thing to do. And I stepped even closer to him. I think our shoes were actually touching. I may have been standing on his toes. And he was holding the pages, and I grabbed his wrist. And I have very powerful hands because everything I do is with my hands. Plus, I was a bodybuilder for years. And I dug the tips of my fingers, my fingernails, into his wrist as hard as I possibly could. And I saw the blood drop right out of his face. He turned white. And I said, say one more word, and I'll knock you out. And in his infinite wisdom, he didn't say another word. And I took the pages, and I got the hell out of there. And when I hit the street, I'm thinking, what did I do? I must have lost my mind. I had a book like my friend Wally Wood. I was on that level. I had a 48-page comic book. And now I had nothing. But I do know this. I could never have tolerated this son of a bitch. I couldn't have tolerated that attitude because he should have taken me under his wing. Am I right? He should have helped me. What would you have done? Probably the same thing. I walked. The hell did I care? I already had 2 full-time jobs. I didn't need this one. So I decided to go down the street about 3 or 4 blocks to Sam's old stomping grounds, Archie Comics. I walked in the reception room. Do you guys want to hear this?
Yeah.
Oh, I kick gluttons for punishment, really. But okay. I walked into the Archie reception room, and I said, I'd like to talk to somebody about a new character. And she said, would you like to talk to John Goldwater? Archie Comics used to be called MLJ Comics in the 40s. Am I right, collectors?
Yes.
MLJ. The MLJ is a kind of anagram for the 3 guys who owned it. The J stood for John Goldwater. And I said, I'd love to talk to John. The guy comes in, it's very congenial. Looked at my pages. Apparently liked what he saw. He said, Jim, I think maybe we could do some business. All right, Sam, are you listening? And I would imagine that my character, Super Agent X, will become part of the Archie line. And he said, I don't think so. He said, I want you to draw all of our superhero covers. They had just gotten into the superhero business.
The Web, the Shield.
Yeah, the Shield, but bringing back some of their old characters.
Is a Jaguar. Yeah.
So,
The Crusaders.
John said, you know, if you could do that for us, you've got a job here. He said, maybe you could come up for a day or two, once a month, and create these covers for us, or you could work at home if you like. And I said, look, John, I appreciate that very much. I like John a lot. We got along, you know. You know, there's a key, you know, what maybe the top thing, the key is to getting along, like with your bosses particularly. You got to speak the same language. If you're speaking a different language to your boss or your wife or your girlfriend or anybody else, you're in deep trouble. But John and I, you get my drift? We spoke the same language, the language of comic books. They were part of our lives, both our lives. And I connected well with John. I liked him. I would have liked to have worked there. But you know, today was Super Agent X Day. I was bound to that character. I said, thank you, but we'll pass on that. Maybe we'll do something in the future. He said, anytime.
Wow.
So I went a few more blocks down the street. And I got to Rockefeller Plaza. Do you know what's there?
DC.
DC Comics. I walked into the reception room, made the same pitch. I've got something here I'd like to show one of your editors. Comic book characters, something new. And it was at the end of lunchtime. And she said, everybody's, you know, still out to lunch. I said, well, you know, maybe I can wait around for a little while. And she said, wait a minute. I believe that Murray Boltinoff is still in his office. I don't know if that name means anything to you, but Murray was an editor up there, mostly, often on humor material, and he was a good editor and writer. I remember reading his stuff when I was a kid, and I said, I'd love to talk to Murray. Murray's a very congenial guy. I liked him. We hit it off immediately. Same language. Got it? And Murray's looking at my pages, and I could tell he liked what he saw. And he said, I think we can do something, Jim. And I'm thinking, damn. I just got fired up here at this place, and a couple minutes later, I don't know, it might have been an hour later, Super Agent X's brothers are now Superman, Batman, the Flash, Hawkman, you know, going down the line. It doesn't get any better than this. And he said, well, not exactly. He said, we have all the characters we need. He said, but I love your writing. And with your consent, I'm going to give you an assignment right now, today. And I said, Murray, I'd love to work for DC on this basis, but really, I don't need another job. What I want to do is place Agent X. This is his moment. And he said, if you change your mind, come back. You got a gig here. So now I can't explain this next part. I kind of forget what's going on. It might take me a couple of minutes to remember, but I went to Paramount Pictures. Paramount had not only offices, they had the whole damn half a block building. It's called the Paramount Building at 44th Street and was it 8th Avenue?
It's around there. I'm
Broadway.
past the building. I'm sorry, past the building.
44th and Broadway. Paramount Building. I'm not sure what I was thinking of, but you know, I must have had a reason. Just take my word for it, okay? Are we friends? Take my word for it. I went into the reception office and I said, yeah, I have something here that I'd like to talk to somebody about. It's new characters, and maybe somebody here would be interested in discussing this with me. And the receptionist said, would you like to talk to Seamus Culhane? That name probably doesn't mean anything to you. But I'm telling you that the name Seamus Culhane in the animation world is as well known as Walt Disney. Maybe you don't, but everybody in that field knows Seamus Culhane, a giant. I knew his name from watching cartoons. I'd love to talk to Seamus Culhane. That's a hell of a great name for an animator, Seamus Culhane. For anything, private detective. Seamus Culhane, ace of space. Seamus got me into his office. I told him what had transpired earlier in the day. I was straight up with him. And he took all my pages, 20 pages from Super Agent X, and he solitaired them on the floor of his office. And this is very much like what an animator would do. What they usually do is take 3x5 cards where moments of cartoons, scenes, moments of scenes, and they tack them up on a kind of big bulletin board, and then they rearrange them, to fit their schedule and their sensibilities. But these were too big to put in the bulletin board. Solitaired them out on the floor, and he began walking back and forth, pacing back and forth, looking at all this action of this new spy character. And Shea was a very savvy guy. He knew exactly what the hell I was doing. I was trying to bring another element into the world of 007 for the public. And he looked, I had some cover sketches. He looked at those and he said, I have an idea. He said, do you think this would make an interesting Saturday morning cartoon series for kids, half-hour segments? Is the Pope Catholic? I said it would fit the bill perfectly because it has an enormous amount of motion to it, topicality, it had heroes and villains and costumes, and my guy was riding a motorcycle, really souped up, modern, futuristic motorcycle. It's called the Cyclone. And he said, I want you to come back next week. I'll have a contract for you. So I sold Super Agent X to Paramount Pictures for a Saturday morning TV series. Sam Schwartz, the next time I see you is going to be in hell. It was 4:45. The end of the day.
Good day, yeah.
It's a good day's work. You know how much trouble I can get into in 15 minutes? I'm not sure why I did this, but I took a cab over to Marvel Comics. We got there at like 3 minutes to 5. I still didn't have a comic book for Super Agent X. Like I really cared. I already had 2 full-time jobs and I just sold the damn thing to Paramount Pictures. I mean, quit while you're ahead, baby, huh? Nah, 15 minutes, come on. So I went up to the 7th floor, opened the door, and there was Marvel's receptionist, Fabulous Flo Steinberg. You know Fabulous Flo Steinberg? Anybody remember? Yeah? I'll bet you don't know why Flo was fabulous. You just have to take my word for it, folks. She was really cute. That little mini skirt on and go-go boots, I'm thinking, hey, this comic book business is not too bad after all. Maybe I should look into this.
And a Brooklyn accent.
And I said, I'd like to see Stan Lee. And she laughed in my face. And I said, what's so funny? She said, nobody sees Stan Lee. And I took my H&X pages, I grabbed her wrist, levered her arm up, put the pages under her arm, snapped it shut, and I said, Stan will see me. And she was kind of stunned at that, like I'd hit her in the head with a ball-peen hammer. It was an option, I guess, but I did do it. And she vanished, came back like 2 or 3 minutes later. Without the pages. That's a good sign. She said, Stan will see you. She was stunned. I mean, she was like, you're in another dimension. It's like, Stan will see you. It was one of the cleanest offices I've ever seen in my life. Impeccable. And it was right on the corner of 57th and Madison, so he could see both directions. A lot of windows. And Stan was just the core of congeniality. Exactly what somebody who had read, the Marvel bullpen pages, by the thousands, exactly what I imagined him to be. And we started a conversation. And then put his feet up on the desk, and he was looking at my pages, and we alternated. He'd ask me a question like, who are you? Where do you come from? What is this all about? He was trying to get information on me. And I was asking him alternately about my favorite Marvel characters, about the artists and the writers producing the books, and so forth. Having these two divergent conversations. And after Stan was through looking at all 20 pages of H&X, which was about 10 minutes later, he said, this work is really crude. But, hey, you know when you get that but? And I said, are you going to tell me? Or is it a secret? He said, no. He said, look, you haven't done comic books. This is something relatively new for you. And it was, because I was involved in the advertising business, where I did plenty of illustration and paintings and so forth, and retouched photos. But comic books were a little removed. You don't just jump into the comic book area. There's a lot to know. Because you have to draw everything beside people, animals, cars, buildings, monsters, rocket ships. I mean, it's endless. But, and I said, fill me in. And he said, this work has energy. And he said, I can sell energy. I said, what does that mean in terms of my working in Super Agent X? And he said, well, I think you should start at Marvel Comics. Not with Super Agent X. Not now. He said, but I'd like to give you one of my books. And there was a rack above his desk that had, on the wall, with all, I think, 32 titles they had there, whatever it was. And he said, the only thing is, all our books are taken right now. I have everything filled. I don't need an artist at the moment. Hey, like I gave it to him because I already, had 2 full-time jobs and I just sold Agent X to Paramount Pictures. What the hell did I care? I didn't care. So, get my pages together and Stan put his hand on the pages and he said, I know what you're going to do. Really? Like what? And he said, well, and I hadn't told him what had transpired previously in the day. He said, I know you're going to go over to DC Comics. I know that they're going to hire you to work for them. You'll be producing their books. He said, I cannot afford you to be my competition. What an interesting way to put it. I said, well, so what? And he thought for a moment, and he said, I'm going to break my own rules. And I said, do it. And he turned to the rack of comics, and he said 2 words that changed the path of comic history. Stan said, pick one. You get it? He was offering me any Marvel book that I wanted. I could have had BFF. I could have had Spider-Man. I could have had Thor. I could have had any of them. He said, pick one. Can I take Stan at his word? Of course. But there's a word. There's a word for following Jack Kirby. Anybody know that word?
Death.
Suicide. I might be crazy, but I'm not stupid. I picked the worst title they had. The worst. The bottom of the barrel. There's all these cool superheroes with masks and hoods and costumes, really cool, and cloaks and all. My guy had a cigar. Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think you know the rest of the story. So now you know how I got there. How much time do we have?
We get till 1. We're fine.
A couple of minutes?
Oh no, we got plenty of time.
Anybody have a question for me?
Yeah, I was gonna say if.
How do you like that? This audience is stunned.
Dude, you got them enraptured. Absolutely, man. This is, there we go, sir.
Make it loud and clear.
Okay, here we go.
Go for it.
I know you were critical of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. early on. I was wondering what your opinion of it is now.
The TV series.
TV series.
I reviewed the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for the Hollywood Reporter.
Yep.
And hated all of them.
What was missing?
And it's not because some jackasses thought because I was looking for Steranko material to be on the screen. I would have hated that even more because I did those books 50 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't want that stuff on the screen. I would have cringed if that was on the screen. I would have gone out and shot somebody's knees off if that would have happened. No, I did not want to see my material on the screen. I wanted to see Fury of 17.
Sure.
I wanted to see Fury updated to today or tomorrow. And I didn't get it. I got soap opera. And it was an ending soap opera. I mean, I'm thinking, can we resolve a couple of these points, like maybe in a month or two? It went on for like a whole season, who is this person? And I couldn't take it. Moreover, who was the head of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Colson.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Colson.
yeah, on the show, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at this guy. I think the actor's name is
Clark Gregg.
Clark Gregg. Never trust a man with two first names.
But Clark, well, I guess.
Especially at the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. Too duplicitous for me. Way too. But I'm looking at this guy. I'm looking at him on the screen. Clark Gregg.
Yeah.
And I know that as a soldier, or even, the kind of role he's playing, but even beneath that, just as a man, this guy's never been in a fight in his life. He has no idea what it's like to take or throw a punch. He's never been there. When he fired a gun, he would blink. He closed his eyes because of the gun flash. Close his eyes because of a gun flash? Give me a break. So, I hated the whole series except for one element. Can you guess? May. May hit the bullseye as far as I was concerned. I think they should have thrown away all the rest and done the May of S.H.I.E.L.D. series. I have to tell her that someday. So, yeah, and you asked me how I feel about the subsequent shows. I've never watched another one. I'm not man enough to do it.
Did you ever watch the Hasselhoff film of the 90s?
I saw the David Hasselhoff S.H.I.E.L.D. and I didn't expect Pretty Boy David Hasselhoff to get there, but he played it in a very crusty manner. The thing was, the script was the worst I had ever in my entire life digested. It was just simply I'm out of words. I just don't know. But it was really, truly bad news. Bad news. I'm going to tell you a little story about my misspent youth. You like it already?
Absolutely.
Rabble.
They're in rapture, Jim. They're hanging on every word. They can't think of applauding or going, yes, they're listening to you.
A story. All right.
Misspent youth.
All right. I call this story Cadillac Nights. I told you that I, played rock and roll for 12 years on a regular basis. Bill Hanley lived like 15 minutes away from me.
Wow.
And Bill Hanley of the band, I knew all those guys. As a matter of fact, his guitarist, Fran Beecher was there the day that I got my rock and roll guitar. I had some other junk guitar before that, and I wanted something else, and Fran played a Gretsch. And he came out of an orchestral kind of background. I mean, he was a music reader, he was playing with big bands, and I'm thinking, get this, if I bought a Gretsch, maybe I'd play like Fran Beecher. It doesn't work that way. And I remember this particular day, somebody brought in, you guys aren't guitar people, so why am I going on with this? Somebody brought in a Les Paul model guitar, golden guitar. I took one look at this and it was like, wow. And I knew Les. Les used to work throughout the Pennsylvania area, right in my neighborhood. Les Paul and Mary Ford. Les Paul is the guy who invented overdubbing. Changed the nature of pop music, right? So, and great guitarist and a great guy too. But anyway, I thought, hey, if this is good enough for Les Paul, I think it might be good enough for me. And then Charlie Richards accepted a shipment, a truck that had pulled up at the record store. And in that shipment were the first Jazz Master Fender guitars to come into Pennsylvania. And it was love at first sight, that's all I can tell you. I still have that guitar.
Wow.
Love at first sight. Now, where the hell was I going with this? Oh. In another city that was close to my city, a rock and roll performer was working for a week. And you have to take my word for it that he was seminally important in rock and roll history. Now I want you to be honest with me. You tell me if you know who Red Prysock was.
I do not know who Red Price, and I worked in rock radio for a long time. I don't know Red Price, please.
Can I tell you?
Absolutely.
Red Prysock was a tenor saxophonist. And skilled to the very top. He cut an album so early in rock and roll history that his album title, and you guys can Google this if you want, is called Rock and Roll.
Wow.
That's the first rock and roll album, rock and roll. And musicians working at the time borrowed material because, I mean, Red literally blew the house down when he worked. I mean, he blew everybody clean off the damn stage. This guy was hot. And he was working in a city, and I went to see him live. It was something I had to do because he was influential in my life and the whole history. There was one tune in particular that he had cut on this album called Hand Clappin'. Every rock and roll musician knew that tune. We used to use it as a break tune in our band. So I'm telling you, this guy had influence. Red Prysock. And there's another name I'm going to give you, just historically, because I'm here and you're over there. Another great tenor saxophonist who set the pace at the time, Syl, S-I-L, Syl Austin. Red Prysock, Syl Austin. They were like Battle of the Saxes.
Oh, wow.
These guys were fabulous. I wish I could take I could pull up Hand Clapping on here in a moment, you know, knock your socks off, but I don't want to see you without your socks. Grim. So anyway, spent the night there and had a hell of a good time. Got to talk to Red for a moment or two. He was everything I wanted him to be in person. And on the way back, I'm driving back to my town, and I took like a shortcut back roads or something, whatever it was, I don't remember. But anyway, I came across this little bar on the side of the road, and I decided to have a drink. So I pulled into the parking lot in my white Cadillac convertible and went inside, sat at the bar, and I noticed when I was walking in that there were 6 motorcycles out front. They were Harleys. 6 of them, all parked side by side. Hey, I was a motorcycle guy for a while. I'd love to tell you a couple of those stories, especially about my Golden Flash. I was rebored to 40 over, the engine, Spitfire cam, racing tires, killer bike. Maybe some other time. So I wasn't really concerned about seeing those bikes out front, and it was late at night, and there was not too many other people there. And I went in and sat at the bar, and there were 3 or 4 guys sitting at a table close by. These were the bikers. And they were having a little contest at the time. They were butting their heads together like rams to see who could no kidding, across the table. I mean, they were smashing their heads together. And I'm thinking, boy, this is some strange country I'm in here, but well, whatever works for them, I guess it's okay. And the bartender came over and I ordered a drink. And this guy's looking me up and down. What do I care? And he left, and I was just sitting there waiting for my drink to show up. And he took a little dog leg. He went over to the bikers and he was talking to them for a moment. And then he did a very, very odd thing. He locked the front door. I didn't know what to make of it either, but I knew it was not a good sign, okay? Bartender came back and gave me a drink. He went out and talked to these guys again, circulating around. I just took my time. And then he came back behind the bar again and he said, "Where'd you get that necktie?" And it was a beautiful tie. I used to call it my good luck tie. It was a black, very thin tie. It was about an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter wide at the most. Very thin tie, very cool. And it had silver stripes on it. Black, silver stripes, really cool. And he said, "Boy, I love that tie." He said, "You must be some pretty cool guy." And that's fighting talk. Again, I didn't care about the tie, but he was trying to get me, into some kind of situation, and I wasn't playing that game with him. And it would have been a good idea because he locked the front door and there were 6 bikers in the room. But he wouldn't let up. He kept talking about this. Where can I get me one of those neckties? Boy, I'd do anything to have one of those ties. I bet you women are swarming all over you. Well, something's going to happen. And what this guy didn't know is that I was packing heat. And I pulled a 25 automatic. It was a woman's pistol, but it was small. I could carry it in my pocket. Who the hell has a big bulge in their pocket? Like a Colt 45, for God's sake, weighs 7 pounds. So I took this 25 automatic, fully loaded, and I brought it slightly up above the level of the bar, and I pointed it right at his face. And I said, "I'm not sure what the hell you're planning, but make it work for you, because one wrong move and I'm going to put a bullet right in your forehead." And take my word for it, it is very, very sobering to have a loaded pistol pointing at you from like 1.5 feet away, and you're looking down the gun barrel knowing that a bullet, and you're flying out of there and your life would end in a second. Very sobering. So this wise guy suddenly turned into some old woman. That disappeared in a moment. He had nothing to say to me. And these guys over here were watching him. They were waiting for something to happen, but they didn't see this pistol. Now, I couldn't get out the front door, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do, so I went to the back door, but it was like a little hallway to a men's room and some other stuff. I backed out, went in the only other door that was available. And then I ran into the men's room, into the restroom. And I barricaded myself in by taking, you know these big, like, fiberboard containers? They're often in restaurants. People put clothing in them. They have lids on the top that clamp on. What do they call them? You know the kind of big containers that and they're often like trash is often in them because they have great durability. I wedged that under the doorknob. And momentarily, I'm assuming everybody who was in the bar came into the hallway and they started pounding on the door, on the bathroom door. You guys want to hear this story? I think I'm going to wrap it up.
You can't leave us.
All right.
You can't leave us empty,
It's a bloodthirsty group, you know?
We got time. We got like 12 minutes before he's done.
So, all right.
How do you figure? Well, they're wrong. We don't. The next thing starts at 1. We got time. We got time. Don't worry about it. Jim. Finish the story.
Are you guys getting engaged here or what?
We're here. We want to know how you got out of the bar. Absolutely. That's what we're talking about.
All right. Well, there were 3 sinks. There were 3 porcelain sinks fastened to the wall, screwed right into the wall with plumbing underneath. You know, when people wash their hands, 3 porcelain sinks. And I jumped up on one of the sinks, the first sink, because behind was a wall with windows above the sinks, and the windows had wire, thick, I'm trying to think, not chicken, but very, very closely woven wire.
Yeah, like a screen, like a window screen.
Sure, window screen.
I'm with you.
But thick. And all 3 windows. And I'm thinking, you know, this is the way out. So, and these guys are pounding on the door trying to get through this. And eventually they probably would have. They would have smashed the panels in the door and you know, gotten into the room. So I knew I only had a minute there. And just because I'm a really nice guy, I jumped up and down on the sink and broke it off. And I broke off all 3 sinks by jumping up and down, and the bathroom and the restroom instantly flooded. I thought I'd distract my hunters. And I smashed one of the windows out with my elbow, and it was a bitch to do because the screen didn't want to give. It was like, you know, nailed in there, but eventually I got the screen out in the glass. And opened the window and got the hell out of there, crawled out. Well, I had been an escape artist as a kid, so I mean, getting through little areas like that was just a piece of cake for me. But my hunters heard the glass smashing, and they heard me destroying the sinks. And the glass smashing tipped them off, and I knew they were running to the front of the bar, out the door, while I was getting out the back. So it became a kind of contest. I had to run around the front to the front of the building, the side to the front of the building, and get into my car. But there was a row of motorcycles parked there, all in a row, really neatly. And I jumped on one of them, and it was a row of dominoes. I knocked all the bikes down. And I did that to further confuse things so that they couldn't follow me relatively easily. And I ran into the parking lot, and there was a guy behind me about maybe 20 feet or something like that. One of the bikers was behind me. Jumped into my Cadillac. The keys may have already been in it, but anyway, no matter what, I mean, I got that Cadillac started and jumped over the barrier. Mounted the barrier and got the hell out of that lot. This guy was very determined. The guy who was pursuing me, that guy, very, very determined. And Cadillacs don't have a real dig-out problem, you know? But once they get moving, you know, they can roll along. 2 Cadillac engines power a tank, power Army tanks. So they've got guts. And I slammed the pedal on the floor and dug out, and this guy was running alongside and kind of intercepting me, and he did. He actually caught up with me, and he grabbed the edge of the car, the door. I was sitting just like 3 inches away. He grabbed the frame of the door, the windows rolled down, grabbed the door frame, and the look on his face, I'll never forget it. It was, gotcha. Maybe. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, probably at, you know, maybe 30 miles an hour or something like that, pedal to the floor, in a few seconds I was at 50 miles an hour. And the look on this guy's face changed because he knew at that moment that he didn't have me. I had him hanging onto the side of my car, like a locust. I reached into my pocket, driving, one hand, reached into my pocket, and I pulled out a silver dollar that I had carried with me for a long time. That was my lucky silver dollar, you get it? My lucky silver dollar. You know why I was so lucky? Because a third of it was ground down to a razor's edge. It was a weapon. And the reason I did that is because if and when I was searched by policemen for any reason, imagine that, a nice guy like me. Unbelievable. What the hell is this world coming to? But I could easily conceal that into the pocket full of change because it just looked like a coin. And even if they found it, so what? You know, somewhere along the way the edge wore off. What does that have to do with me? You know. Well, I pulled this silver dollar out of my pocket, my right hand, driving with my left, and I reach over my left hand with my right to where this guy's fingers are holding onto the door. And I can tell you my intent was very simple. In my heart of hearts, I wanted to cut off, literally sever every one of his fingers, which I tried to do by grinding that silver dollar home to a razor's edge across all 4 of his fingers as hard as I possibly could. That's pretty much the end of the story. Except a moment later, I looked in the rearview mirror and he was tumbling along the road. Tumbling, pinwheeling along the road, which I thought was a pretty cute trick. Anyway, that was my red prize sock gig, and I remember this every time, which wasn't often. I didn't use that road very much. But every time I drive on that road, subsequently, I'd always look for this guy's fingers on the side.
I always look forward to seeing you at conventions because we're close to the end. Unfortunately.
Do I have a couple minutes?
You got 2 minutes.
Can you handle this? Are you guys man enough?
All right.
Quickly. I had given up motorcycles by this time. I had an accident with my BSA Golden Flash. That was the one with the engine reboard, 40 over, and there was a lightning bolt. Chrome tank, black fenders. God, it's a beautiful thing. But anyway, I wrecked it to smithereens. And it kind of retaliated to me. But anyway, that's another story. I'm driving down a main artery in my little town going into the heart of the city along this artery, and I passed a gas station that was inhabited by bikers. And, you know, these guys were my brothers at one time, but I never really fit in anywhere. I gotta tell you that. Anywhere, even no matter at any time of my life, I was never an easy fit anywhere. And as we drove by, I was in a Plymouth convertible, black. As we drove by, my girlfriend and I, going into the heart of town, we passed this garage with a bunch of cycle thugs. And just a moment after we passed, I heard them kicking off the engines. I heard them starting and thinking like, now, hey, this is gonna be fun. And in a block or two, I had maybe 4 or 5 bikes behind me and close behind me. And they were following me. And 2 of the bikes came around to the sides, on both sides of my car, the Plymouth, and to the front. They moved from the sides to the front, and they slowed down so they could keep me trapped. Got it? And during this procedure, as they were passing by and from in the positions where they were threatening me and using the foulest language you could possibly imagine. And this was very disturbing to me because I was with my girlfriend, and it was a really uncomfortable gig. And I made a mistake. I did regular math. Regular, M-A-T-H, math. It was like 5 against 1. You know regular math? 5 against 1. You know, what the hell was I gonna do? I made a mistake. I should have done Steranko math, which I did momentarily. I recovered from the stupor. And Steranko math is this: my car weighed 2 tons. All their bikes together might have weighed, I don't know, 16, 15, 1,400 pounds. Steranko math. Are you following me? All the lights were coordinated on this particular street to get traffic, you know, into the heart of the city. So in the matter of maybe a minute and a half, we were all doing like 40, 45, 50, maybe 55 miles an hour. We were cruising along, tearing up that street. And that's when I did the Steranko math. And I slammed on the brakes. Oh, I remember sorry, I left out a little part of the story. I hit the pedal, the gas pedal, and the car shot forward, and the 2 guys in front of me on bikes, I would have run right over them. They parted and dropped back to their other guys. That's when I slammed on the brakes. And in a moment, there were motorcycle parts and fenders, gearboxes, handlebars, arms, legs, all over the street. And at that moment, I stood up, turned around and said, "Now I'm gonna back up!"
Guys, nobody's stable without this alley, and seriously, it's always a pleasure. The man has a million stories, has to tell. The great Jim Steranko